Suddenly, the sharing economy is everywhere. It's how you vacation, how you buy and sell goods and services, and of course, how you get a ride. But as its market share rises and jurisdictions around the world seek to regulate it, the sharing economy faces new questions about whether the promise of its peer-to-peer ethos can live up to the dream. Joining us now for a reality check, Tom Slee. He is the author of What's Yours is Mine, Against the Sharing Economy. Sunil Johal is here. He's Policy Director at the Mowat Centre at the University of Toronto. And Esther Nerling is here. She is an UberX driver. Nice to have everybody here today. I want to start by playing some, I was going to say tape. We don't run tape anymore, but we're going to roll a clip. Federal Conservative MP named Alex Nuttall from the Barrie area is a parliamentary critic for the quote-unquote new sharing economy. And here's a video that he posted to his Facebook page. We're going to play some of that, and we'll come back and chat. Sheldon, if you would.
Times are changing, the way our economy works is changing, and Canadians are more and more turning to companies like Airbnb and Uber to get exactly what they need. That's why I'm really excited to take on this new role, because it's a great opportunity to stand up for Canadians who want more choice, lower prices, and even better service. These new companies challenge the status quo. They shake up the market, and that is a good thing.
Okay, that's Alex's viewpoint. Sunil, let's figure out off the top here, how big is the sharing economy currently? So
PwC, the consulting firm, estimates that the revenue value of the sharing economy currently is about $15 billion US. That's expected to rise to over $330 billion by 2025. That's global. So if we're thinking about a Canadian number, it's obviously much smaller than that. Mm-hmm. I would say probably in the low hundreds of millions of dollars currently. Potentially, we could be talking a few $1 billion by 2025.
Okay. Of the few hundreds of billions currently, how much of that is your piece of the action?
About $500 a week.
You make $500 a week?
I do.
For driving UberX?
I do.
You happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Because?
Because it takes me out of the poverty level. So my pension income that I would be having to sustain myself on would not be sufficient, and I could be socially reliant on someone else. So it takes me into being able to take care of myself.
And this is your way, I guess, of making ends meet in the way you can.
Exactly, it's my survival.
It's your survival. Okay, here's a quote. One of the most multifaceted and careful documentations of Uber driver pay is an account by Philadelphia journalist Emily Gwendelsberger of her time as an Uber driver. After meticulously tracking her own expenses and those of other drivers who shared them with her, she made about $17 per hour gross, and after Uber's 28% cut and the 19% that went to expenses, she ended up with just $9.34 an hour. What's your view about whether or not that's all okay?
I think the pay for Uber debate has been changing a lot over the last 2 years. 2 years ago in May, they came out with a number and they were saying, you know what, you can earn $90,000 a year if you're an Uber driver in New York. And a lot of journalists went chasing after that and said, can we find, they couldn't find these people, right? And since then, that story has changed. It's come down, it's come down, it's come down. And as Uber moves forward in different cities, it takes a bigger slice of the pie, and it knows that it can optimize and squeeze its drivers.
But if so many people are prepared to work for what is, actually below minimum wage after it's all said and done, well, I guess the question is, why are so many people prepared to do that kind of work if it's so bad?
Well, I think, in most economies, there's always folks who need a job, right? Mm-hmm. And you can have very low-paying jobs that people will apply to and people will work for. But here in Canada, we do have labor standards, and we have it for a reason. We have it because that kind of race to the bottom that a purely free market approach encourages does not end up in a good place. So I think that's why we look to have job protections and labor standards. And I think that companies like Uber, they're a large company now. They need to face up to their own responsibilities when it comes to that kind of employment.
Okay, Sunil, as you analyze this, what would you say the long-range implications are of a proliferation of this kind of work?
They're significant. I think essentially what we're seeing, and Uber is really kind of a canary in the coal mine for this, is more and more risk is being shifted onto workers and away from the state and away from corporations. And that's because most of our social policies and social infrastructure in Canada were developed in the 1950s when permanent jobs with pensions were very common. We don't have that same situation now. And we have, some estimates, up to 50% of the workforce is precariously employed. Many more people are working in part-time jobs that would rather work in full-time jobs. Many people don't have access to pharmacare, to other types of benefits. So the question is, who's going to step in and spread that risk and fill those gaps for people who are in precarious situations, who are in the gig economy, driving for Uber, and who'd maybe like a better job? Is it Uber's responsibility? I wouldn't say it is. I would say it's the responsibility of governments to put in place the right frameworks and the right social policies to make sure that we're not letting people fall through the gaps.
Well, Tom, let's understand this clearly. Do you object to what Esther does?
I don't object to what Esther does. I object to what Uber does.
What's the distinction?
The distinction is that Esther's trying to get by and she's trying to make a living for herself, and I have no problems with that. Uber is a company that is now valued at over $60 billion. It's valued about the same as General Motors. It's a company that's funded by some very wealthy interests. It's accumulated $8 billion of money from investors around the world that it can use to spend trying to change democratically made rules in cities around the world, and that's what I object to.
Esther, do you understand his objections?
I do. I get what he's saying. However, I think I tend to go more with Sunil said, where overall in our society, things have crumbled. Just in the workplace, there's more and more part-time employment because employers don't have to pay benefits. So it's left a lot of people in a crack of how they're going to live, and any dollar or two that they're going to make is going to make a difference.
Okay, let's look at Sunil. I showed his work, now I'm going to show your work.
Great.
Policy making for the sharing economy. That's the Mowat Center's latest contribution to this. And let's do an excerpt from that. As these marketplaces expand and threaten to disrupt established business models, policymakers around the world are trying to develop appropriate responses to the sharing economy. To date, the reaction from governments has felt like a frantic game of whack-a-mole. Okay, what do you mean by that?
So what we mean is that we're seeing Uber and other companies like Airbnb set up shop, and the rules of the game aren't clear or haven't been thought through by government because these companies are moving so quickly. And a company like Uber has no capital constraints to expansion. They don't own any cars. They're just essentially setting up and waiting for people with cars to sign up for their platform and become drivers. So that's great for drivers, it's great for passengers, but it's not great necessarily for the public interest because governments always take a good amount of time to develop rules, and that's reasonable because we don't want rules that are written on the back of a cocktail napkin. But the sharing economy and technology firms generally move at such a quick pace that the lag between what they're doing and the regulations catching up is drifting further and further apart. And we're seeing governments around the world really struggle with that. And it's putting drivers, it's putting citizens in an awkward spot where, is what I'm doing legal? Is it not legal? What are the rules of the game? So I think it's imperative for governments to move as quickly as possible. And that doesn't mean developing final rules, but at least develop, here are some framework draft rules. We're going to put these in place for a year, see what happens, and then we're able to adjust those if we need to.
I'd be interested in your view on, as you know, some jurisdictions are going heavy into regulation because they don't like Uber. Others are saying, come on in, kind of wild, wild west, do your thing, disrupt away. Where are you?
My general perspective is the taxi industry hasn't exactly been an exemplar of great service and even great working conditions for cab drivers generally. It's a broken system, so it needs shaking up. Uber has obviously shaken the system up. I would argue that what governments around the world, in Ontario, across Canada, should be doing is, what is in the public interest here? Do we want a safe taxi system? We want an accessible taxi system. We want competition where prices are reasonable. And let's design simple, basic rules that drive towards those 3 or 4 key objectives. And I think that's what we're starting to see in Toronto, in Ottawa, in some of these other cities, that we're starting to see that policy conversation start to take place.
Tom, you presumably want heavy regulation on Uber, or would you rather just ban it altogether?
No, I don't think it even maybe logically makes sense to say ban a company, right? It's all a matter about the practices under which they operate. And I think they have deliberately, Sunil's saying, pushing forward very quickly, trying to force governments to move quickly. I don't think there's necessarily a need to move that quickly. I think governments can afford to take their time. I think if you look in, if you look in Germany, if you look in Korea, if you look in Spain, some governments have said, we need time to sort this out. The other thing is, I think there's nothing inevitable about the future of Uber, right? Technology is going to change. We know that in 10 years' time, we're going to be using smartphones or whatever comes next for more parts of our lives. But Uber is, although a part of this story is a technology story, a lot of it is, as I say, a bet that they can change rules. It's a matter of, it's a deregulation story as much as it's a technology story. And I think Sunil is right that the taxi industry is not one that has gained a lot of fans, that's for sure. But I think we need to remember why cities around the world have chosen to regulate that part of its...
Let me pick up on that, because one of the areas that the taxi industry has said is really unfair is that they're obliged to carry a pretty heavy insurance in order to deal with what if an accident happens, whereas Uber drivers don't have to. I think a lot of jurisdictions have heard that complaint, and they have said, probably makes sense if Uber drivers have to carry some insurance as well. What about that? Are you going to do that?
Of course. I think that there's very few of us that would not comply to certain things.
Like what?
Like insurance.
So you will buy insurance, extra insurance to deal with sort of accidents under a professional...
Even on the proposed things, I already have all that insurance because I also am important when I drive my car.
Yes, you are.
I drive aging parents in there, nieces, nephews.
But that's
and
different.
I'm in there.
That's different from the kind of sort of professional type insurance that you'd have to buy as a business, right?
Exactly. But you have to also compare apples with apples. So a taxi cab is going to be insured for about 10,060 minutes in a week because it's insured for 24/7, 7 days a week with multiple drivers. My car is insured for me for about 1,240 minutes. So everything has to be taken into account in measurements to be fair.
Are there any regulations that you're hearing about right now that as you look at them you think that's just not on, I'm not going to do that?
Well, one of them, for an example, is having a camera in my car. I don't need a camera in my car unless it's to take the pictures of the beautiful people I drive. Seriously? Because I drive registered guests, and every one of my trips is registered and documented. So I'm not picking up people from a curb.
I think you're having the discussion about insurance and what should Uber drivers get, but I think that the big question here is what should Uber be on the hook for, right? If I order an Uber ride and you come along and pick me up, I shouldn't have to grill you about the state of your insurance. Uber needs to be able to provide guarantees about the insurance that's done on its platform. And right now, a big part of its business is saying, hey, when push comes to shove, they say, we're just a matchmaking service. It's not our responsibility to say who's insured and who's not. We can recommend, we can tell people, but we can't provide those kind of guarantees. I think they're a big company, they want to play in Canada, that's the kind of standard we expect from them.
Let me pick up on this notion that Tom said a minute ago about sort of a race to the bottom in terms of standards. The taxi industry did complain that a lot of the things they have to do that Uber doesn't have to do has made them uncompetitive, and they want those regulations changed. And some of that has happened. I think taxis now no longer have to have snow tires on in the wintertime. I guess the question is this in the public interest that these standards would be downgraded in order to be more competitive?
It depends on what you're talking about, but generally speaking, lowering
driver education, that was another one.
Lowering standards generally probably isn't a good idea, but in the case of, for example, driver education, cab drivers in Toronto were required to take 17 days of in-class training to become a cab driver.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, but I would say a lot of people would say, what were they learning in those 17 days? Because the service quality that they were getting from cab drivers wasn't exactly incredibly high. So maybe that means we need to change the kind of education that's required. Maybe we can tailor it. But it's really, again, looking back at what's in the public interest here. Do we want to waste cab drivers' time and money having to pay for a course that's 3.5 weeks where they're not working, where they're not really learning anything? Or can we say, here are 5 key things we need you to know and to do when somebody gets into your car. And that's the key thing we need to do. So really what's required, not anything extra and not anything below that.
Tom, let's talk taxes. This is an issue you raise in your book, and once again, we're going to do an excerpt here from your book. Sheldon, if you would, let's bring up this quote. After a Toronto councillor obtained an email stating that there is no tax charged on Uber rides, the company claimed that its drivers are expected to collect sales tax, even though the cashless transaction is part of the service's appeal. Whatever happens to the driver's portion of the fare, the company's cut is tax-free. If you take an Uber in Canada, your credit card payment will go to Uber BV, incorporated in the Netherlands, for tax reasons. You want to explain all that to us?
Yeah, so this is a tactic that's become quite common, and Uber is one of many companies that's really built a whole model around this. So what happens is this. If I order a taxi service, an Uber ride, then my payment goes to Uber BV. Uber BV is a subsidiary of Uber that operates out of the Netherlands.
Why?
So Uber Canada, just to start with, makes no money. So all the people who are representing Uber here, they have no income, so they pay no taxes. Uber BV, you'd think, well, it's taking in a bunch of money, so it's going to pay taxes on that. But surprisingly, Uber BV licenses its own intellectual property from another Uber subsidiary called Uber International, which is based partly in the Netherlands and partly in Bermuda.
And the advantage of doing all that is?
They avoid paying taxes in the Netherlands because the Netherlands doesn't charge tax on intellectual property. So is it confusing? Yes. Is it meant to be confusing? Absolutely. But the end result is that Uber ends up paying basically no taxes on its operations that happen outside the US.
Do you have a guess as to how much revenue the Canada Revenue Agency is foregoing because of this legal, we should add, legal loophole?
Sunil was saying if we estimate the size of the sharing economy right now in Canada to be 100 million, low 100 millions, then
but that's
what's
everything,
10%
not just
of
Uber.
Yeah, so if Uber is probably around 50 to 80 million of that, somewhere in that kind of range, that was from September 14th to September 2015, then 30%, 13% of that. So we're talking 10 million. The whole thing about the sharing economy is that internet platforms is taking this model of a transaction that used to happen locally and now happens internationally, and it's spreading that into the service economy. So we had this with Amazon bookstores, now we have it with Uber, now we have it with Airbnb, and it makes taxation a very difficult problem.
Let me ask Esther how she handles it. We did not invite you on this program today to get you in trouble with CRA, just to let you know.
Well,
so if you don't want to answer any of these questions, that's okay, but I'm going to ask them anyway.
All right.
You do make revenue.
I do.
Revenue is taxable.
Right.
Do you declare it?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
How do I know that?
Well, that's probably the question I don't need to answer to you.
Okay, because of course, governments everywhere, are straining under, in their view, a lack of resources to pay for public services that people want, and they obviously have their eyes on the sharing economy, much of which goes,
exactly,
in the
and
shadows.
I'd like to speak to that actually,
Please.
Just because I don't exactly agree with everything that Tom says.
How about anything Tom says?
No, he's a nice man. But when it comes to, holding companies accountable, whether it's Uber or anybody, I believe that the structure or the regulation and how they would like to keep them accountable has to be attached to them. My example would be like if your dog gets fleas, what do you treat? You treat the dog to get rid of the fleas, right? Because a whole bunch of us Uber drivers would be like the fleas, right? With the new proposed legislation, even at City Hall, there would be a price of cents per fare. Mm-hmm. So they're destined to, I think the prediction was like 3.5 million. So to say that Uber would not pay anything is slightly misleading, because if it's structured properly, they have to be held accountable and money has to be taken off. They would be paying $20,000 just to be existent.
Okay, but let me, forgive me here, I want to return to the issue of taxes, because you are a very honest person. We can tell.
Right.
And therefore, the revenue you earn from driving for Uber, you declare on your tax form and you pay tax on it.
Right.
This will not come as a shock to you. Not everybody does.
Right, but
So,
you know, yeah.
and Sunil wants to speak to that.
Can I just jump in
Yeah.
for a second? I mean, one of the things we need to think about, in a certain way, the sharing economy actually surfaces a lot of cash transactions. Everything that Esther is doing is on a credit card and is trackable. And what we're seeing in some jurisdictions like France is the countries are dealing directly with the platform in terms of tax remittance issues. So instead of having to worry about Esther paying certain taxes, let's deal with the Airbnbs and the Uber. So that's what Canada needs to get on board with. Let's not worry about the small scale
Don't worry about Esther.
entrepreneurs.
Go
Let's
after
deal
the
with
business.
Uber and say, look, you've got X number of drivers in the country. We know you're going to have to pay X amount of tax. Let's move forward in that kind of a smart way.
Do you have any evidence that there's a ton of tax avoidance going on right now?
No, I actually don't think there is. I think the sharing economy surfaces a lot of things that otherwise were in that gray market where people were just handing cash to a house cleaner or handing cash to a bandit
What's happening
cab.
now, though, is that companies are setting up and they're saying, we can take those informal transactions, we can take that model, and we can scale that up, and we can build a multi-billion-dollar business on it. And my view on that is, if you want to build a multi-billion-dollar businesses, you make sure the taxes are handled properly. And I think Sunil is right that you go to Uber for that. And what you were saying, you go to the dog, you go to Uber to deal with the tax issues.
While you have the floor, Tom, there is a part of your book where you make a most unexpected point, and I'd like you to just help us understand this. You say that the way Uber functions cuts down on racism?
I don't say it quite so bluntly as that, but I do
May have the possibility of cutting down on racism.
It's to do partly with what Sunil was saying about surfacing certain kinds of things. I mean, I'm not here as a representative, or I don't speak for the taxi industry. I have no connections to the taxi industry. We know that especially in a number of U.S. cities, that people of color have a hard time getting a ride on a taxi at the side of the street. And there have been a lot of reports of those people saying, you know what, if I have a credit card, I can call an Uber, and I don't face that problem. So that's what I was meaning with saying that it has helped some people to get past that phenomenon of, oh, you're going by me and you're picking up the white guy 20 yards up the street, right? The other side of this that we don't know is, are there other avenues where racism can be expressed within Uber's system? If your name is Mohammed, what's your driver rating going to be like compared to John Smith? We don't know, because Uber is a black box and we can't see inside their systems.
Uber calls their drivers partners.
Right.
Do you feel like you're in partnership with them?
Yes.
You do. How come?
Well, because I every week I'm basically held accountable, and also in some aspects it's also the way they make sure I know I exist. So every week I get a report card that shows my rating.
What's your rating?
My rating is 4.9.
Hey, that's pretty good.
And I maintain it. I have a very high rating. And
That's out of 5, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just
Yes.
in case some people who haven't taken Uber think it's out of 10 and they're wondering why I'm praising it.
Yeah.
4.9 out of 5 is pretty good.
Right. I get commented on my rating all the time. And they also put all the comments that my clients write about me. And if I ever have a blue day, I just need to look at my comments and I feel so much better.
Sunil, I want to put this comment to you. The Canadian blogger Glenn Carter has said that most of the critics of the sharing economy are, quote, like modern-day candlestick makers protesting Edison's light bulb. Now, the fact is people still do buy candles. So I do wonder whether or not Uber and the taxi industry can peacefully coexist.
I absolutely think they can. I think what you're going to see is a convergence between the business models. Customers obviously like the flexibility of having an app, seeing where the car is on its way to your pickup so you're not waiting outside in the cold. They like the rating systems. If governments can properly monitor those rating systems so we get inside that black box that Tom's talking about and we're not just completely reliant on what Uber is telling us, I think we'll be in a good position. And I think a lot of cab companies are already talking about reforming themselves into some kind of private transportation network or a fleet that's more aligned with how Uber operates. So I think in the long run, we're going to see better competition and better outcomes for consumers, but that's only if government gets the rules of the game right. And that's the open question to us now, is how are the rules of the game going to actually play out in real market conditions?
Do you think coexistence is possible
Yes, I do.
with the taxi industry?
I do, because about 60 to 70% of their business, I can't even touch it, because I have nobody that hails me and I don't have a taxi stand. So that part is always going to be there for them. There is definitely people who only want to ride in a taxi. They're not going to change their mind. We do have a few converts, but you know, it's all about choice, you know, and just that the fact that people can have a choice which way they want to be moved, I think is very important and should never be overlooked.
Gotcha. Thanks, everybody, for this discussion. Happy to have had on our program today Tom Slee, the author of What's Yours Is Mine, Against the Sharing Economy, Sunil Johal, Policy Director at the Mowat Centre at the University of Toronto, and Esther Nerling, an UberX driver who goes by the handle Esther, UberX Queen. Thank you, Your Majesty.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.